Thanks again, Jake, for joining me today. If you wanted to start off, could you maybe talk for a minute about who you are and what you're building at Common Paper?
Cool. Yeah, very happy to be here, and thanks for chatting. My name's Jake Stein. I'm co-founder and CEO of Common Paper. We help B2B software startups close deals with their customers. So part of that is we create open source standard agreements. So sort of like the SAFE, but for sales contracts. And that includes NDAs, cloud service agreements, SLAs, DPAs, and so on. And they're created by a committee of 40 amazing attorneys. Those are all free and licensed under Creative Commons, so anybody can use them. And then the other part of our business is we build software for managing those contracts. So proposing to customers, negotiating, getting deals signed, and then billing those customers so you can actually get paid after you close the deal.
Cool. Awesome summary. And I was looking at your website. Some of your customers are like Dagster, Mercury. Who are some of the other customers so the audience has an idea?
Yeah, so it's sort of a grab bag of some like brand new startups that you probably haven't heard of. Some of the bigger companies that use our agreements and our stuff. Mercury, you mentioned. Figma is another one. It's all like runs the gamut of software companies really that are buying and selling software.
Cool. Awesome. And then you participated in YC's Winter 2023 batch. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Cool. Well, I wanted to start us off by just talking a little bit about like the mindset of joining Accelerator. Like, was joining a startup accelerator basically like always a plan for this company, or what even got you excited about potentially going down this route in the first place?
Yeah. So it wasn't originally part of the plan, and we're a little bit unusual in that we actually raised our seed round before we applied to YC.
Yep.
It was only something that, and we raised from two amazing firms, Bold Start Ventures and Uncork Capital. And they've been really helpful. And it was only a little while later that we realized that we thought that YC could be sort of uniquely valuable for us. And since it was like an unusual sequence, I wasn't totally sure if the partners at those firms would be down, but they were really supportive and they totally agreed with our rationale as to why it would be valuable for us. It was a later stage decision for us.
Cool. It's awesome to hear that the investors were supportive of you going down that route. You mentioned YC was like uniquely valuable, or you thought it could be uniquely valuable. What in particular stood out about the program to you?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things about YC that I think would be valuable for any startup. There's like the partners there are extremely knowledgeable, extremely helpful, like amazing advice. I think just the nature of the cohorts are really valuable, where you're in a group with a bunch of other people that are like extremely smart, extremely ambitious, extremely hardworking, and like at a similar stage to you. And then so it's really motivating just to see them making crazy fast progress and thinking like, oh man, like it's like maybe like a little bit competitive, but like you want them to win, but it makes you question yourself. It's like, gosh, they're making so much progress. Why can't I do the same? And so it sort of drives us to push harder. And then the piece that's sort of unique about us in YC is that like part of what we're trying to do is to create this like standard agreement, the standard contract that lots of people use, whether or not they have anything to do with us as a company. And that's really rare. Like there's a small number of examples where that has happened. And one of the examples is YC, who created the SAFE that, all the companies YC invest in use the SAFE, but so do like the majority of other startups. So they are one of the few people who have created a standard contract that is widely used. So in addition to all the other benefits, we wanted to talk with them and have them in our corner for that sort of thing as well.
Makes a lot of sense. And were you just considering YC, or were you also looking at other startup accelerators?
We only looked at YC.
Okay, cool. Wanted to transition a little bit to admissions now. I was wondering if you could give just like a quick overview of like what the admission process is. Is it just like a written application? You have your video that you attach to your application, and then is it just like one live interview in San Francisco, or how does the admission process work?
Yep. So there is a written interview, a written application, which honestly, like even if people are not doing YC, I think it's like really helpful to fill out that application doc, just because it like it has a bunch of really good questions about your startup and prompts your thinking.
Yeah.
We also submitted a video, my co-founder and myself. There's like optionally you can have YC alumni recommend you, but that's basically it. Then you wait, you see if you got an interview. The interview, at least for us, happened over Zoom, and I think that's still the case, that the interviews are over Zoom. I think they typically last around 10 minutes. And that was like a super intense period, not intense like high pressure, but just like a lot of information transmitted very quickly and just a lot of questions. But yeah, that, and then, you know, a day, either later that day or the next day, I think it was probably later that day, we found out that we got it.
Cool. And who was on your interview call? Was it like the YC partners? Were they using alumni? Was it a mix of both?
Yeah, so there was definitely, so Aaron Epstein, who ended up being our group partner, was on the call. Also, two people who would become our visiting group partners, Pete Kuman from Optimizely and Umar Subuku, and I apologize, I may be messing up his name. He originally was from Citus Data. They were on the call, and Kat from the YC team was on it as well. I think that was everybody.
Cool. Can you give maybe some examples of the types of questions they would ask? Or I'm also curious, like, I imagine you prepared a lot for that interview. Like, was there any questions that caught you off guard or you were surprised by?
So the one, I don't remember a lot of the questions. One of the ones that they asked that I was totally taken off guard by was just, why haven't you made more progress? Which sort of like put me back on my heels in the moment. And I like, it's not a question that had been asked to me before. And again, it wasn't like them being negative or anything like that. It's just like, you've been working on it. You know, what is the limiting factor? Why haven't you moved faster? Why haven't you gotten more users, more customers, and things like that? So that was, I felt like, just like a great question that really I was unprepared for, but prompted a lot of thinking on my part. They asked about like our strategy, like why do the standard agreements? Why not just build software? Or why not just use a contract that, you know, someone else has created? Why do we have to do it? They talked about like our target customer, why this kind of customer versus that kind of customer. So there's a lot of questions about like, we had made a bunch of decisions and done a bunch of things against those decisions. And they were sort of pushing and pressing and saying like, why this, why not that? I think just to see, you know, how we make decisions and how we work, basically.
Cool. And then I imagine a lot of friends or people in the community probably like text you this, but they probably asking like, how do I get into YC? Like, what advice would you give to a founder to like increase their chances of getting into a program like this?
It seems to me like extremely hard to game this process, just because like they're very no BS. They're not looking for slick stuff or anything like that. I mean, I think there's someone on the admissions team told me there's just like a shockingly high percentage of people who just like don't, I don't know, like actually maybe that's not really the right way to think about it. I think it's being honest and being as formidable as possible. That's sort of like the actual thing. And so like, I think it's probably not worth hyper optimizing the application. What is better is just trying to make progress on the startup idea as quickly as possible. So like, if you have an idea and haven't talked to any customers, talk to some customers. If you have like talked to customers, but you haven't actually asked them to pay, ask them to pay. If you like have a prototype, but you haven't built anything, build something. So I would say the best way to get in is just like make progress on your startup idea. And the great thing about that is that whether or not you get into YC, that's really valuable. So it's not like, I mean, every once in a while people ask me like, hey, can you review my application or can you talk to me before the interview? And I'm happy to do that. But I think the most important thing is just like make your idea better, work on your startup and make progress.
Nice. I really like that. That advice. I think just like the more clarity you have around your startup, the probably like the better you'll do during the interview process, and you get that by actually doing stuff. So really like that. So I've heard this a couple of times that like YC partners will basically like give feedback to the people that they reject. I was kind of curious, like, do they give feedback to you when they accept you? Like they tell you like, oh, we liked X, Y, and Z, XYZ things about your startup, or not really?
I think I definitely got both positive and negative feedback from the YC partners. I don't think I got a ton of it in that call. Like, I think like the headline of the call after when they were accepting us was, "Hey, we really enjoyed talking with you. We think this could be really big. We'd love for you to join YC." And then, I had a bunch of clarifying questions about what exactly happens in the program and how it all works and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like, separately, we have office hours periodically, and they told us like, "We really like this about you, but it seems concerning that you haven't made progress in this way." And so like that is part of the thing of like, it seems like you're doing really great on this, but it seems like you're totally not getting any traction in this way. So that's definitely part of the YC relationship, but not in that original call for me.
Cool. And then to kind of move on to just like the program aspect,
Yep.
some of the changes that I've seen from the outside and want to get your take on. One is just like YC's definitely increased the size of their cohorts. I think for your batch, it was like 270 startups based on what I saw in the directory. Maybe that's a little bit off, I don't know. But did you see any trade-offs with the larger cohort? Like what were the benefits of having it? Maybe what were the downsides of having that many people?
So I've only done it once, so I can't really compare to when it was smaller. So one thing to note is that like, while that is the size of the batch, and I don't know if 270 is exactly right, but I think that's probably the right order of magnitude. There are like groups within the batch, and then there's sections within the group. So like when you have group office hours, so you have like in one-on-one office hours, just like the co-founders and one of the partners, or maybe two of the partners. That's just you guys or you folks. And then there's group office hours where it's just like maybe like 7 or 10 companies. So that's like a small group that you get really close with. And so there are opportunities to like have the more close-knit thing that I imagine was what it was like, 10 or 15 years ago. So I think on balance, it seems great that the community is bigger. I don't think there's like a downside for me personally that it's bigger. And like the partners that I interacted with were unbelievably amazing. I think, maybe in the early days, it was like everybody had a one-on-one relationship with Paul Graham and I never met him. So like that's a downside, I guess. But it's not like, I did not observe like a downside to having YC as an organization be bigger because
cool, makes a lot of sense. So they made it feel a lot smaller by how they structure it. I think one of the obvious upsides is like just the liquidity in the network. So there's like more distribution, right? I imagine that's really helpful for a company like yourself that's selling startups that are in YC. The other big thing that wanted to maybe call out was Gary Tan returning to YC. What's, I guess, like his imprint on YC, or was there anything he was like working on that you saw, or just like being around him, I guess, any takes on that?
So like at our batch retreat, he gave at least one talk, maybe a couple talks. And I thought he was like super smart and empathetic and like a great presence. I don't know that like, when YC does something, I don't know that, this is because Gary's in charge now versus whoever was in charge before. But like, just as a human, he seems great. And I've only had like, again, seen him talk a couple times. But like, I would say the short answer is I don't think I really know what his impact is on YC, other than I get generally positive vibes.
Cool. And then kind of curious, I know you had raised money before YC. Did you end up raising money for demo day or after YC, or not yet?
Yeah, we raised a little bit more after demo day. So like you said, we had raised our seed round before YC. The demo day environment is like a really special fundraising situation. And so we wanted to like take advantage of that in a small way. Like we were not trying to raise our Series A, but our existing investors put some more in, and we basically set it up so that we could take a little bit more from like the demo day group. And then we just thought that's such like a special opportunity to fundraise with such a like amazing group of people. And like, that was really wild. So I'm glad that we were able to participate in that.
Cool. And demo days are now back in person in San Francisco. Is that how they're working?
So I don't know about this batch. For our batch, it was virtual.
Virtual. Okay.
Yes, but yeah, and I actually did not participate in demo day because my daughter was born like 2 days before.
Oh, wow.
And so my co-founder did an amazing job of like Ben is his name, and he did the presentation and absolutely killed it. I had a Zoom going on over here as I was like changing diapers, but it was amazing to watch him.
Cool. And then I'm not sure if you saw that post by Jeff Weinstein from FJ Labs a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn.
Sure.
But he was saying that startups who were raising in 2017 to 2020 were probably raising at around like 8 million coming out of YC. And then he's now saying that today they're raising at like $20 million. And he basically implied that the new deal was what was pushing prices up. And Gary Tan actually like commented on it. I was wondering if you had a take on just like whether the new deal is having like implications on your fundraise. Like, what are you hearing, I guess, from investors, or maybe your co-founder has a better picture of like what investors were asking about. So do you think it's like the new deal is pushing up prices for YC startups, or do you think it's largely influenced by how far along the startups are now in YC batches?
Well, yeah, there's another case where like I don't have anything to compare it to, since I've only went through YC once. I would say like the fact that with the new YC deal, startups get more money, I think it would have to give the startups more negotiating leverage, because there are companies that like with 500K, they can get to break even. And so like if that just means that they have like a better alternative to a negotiated agreement, so they can walk away if they don't like the terms. So it seems plausible to me that like, because the new deal puts the companies in a better position, companies on average end up with better valuations. I mean, I imagine there's a bunch of other factors too, of just like, you know, it's a market and interest rates and whatever. But it seems plausible to me that that would be at least part of it.
Cool. And then now that you're finished with the program, I guess like how are you still engaging with the community? Is it mostly just talking with like founders from your batch? Are there certain like products that YC built that you're still using? I know they have like an investor database, some other tools. Like how are you still engaging?
Yeah, I use Bookface, which is the internal forum, like probably at least once a week, sometimes like a couple times a week. Some of it is just seeing the post. Some of it is like looking up investors or like checking out like what deals we can get for a product we're trying out. And then like there's a Slack for our group? Yeah, for our group. And so like communicating with people. On Thursday, I have a catch up. Like we do once a month, we meet up with like the folks in my section, just like those 10 startups. So yeah, we still have a bunch of touch points with the YC community. I'm also like talking to someone who works at YC next week to get their advice about something. So yeah, we did get a bunch out of it.
Cool. And then last question, because I know we're getting close on time.
And I can go a couple minutes longer if you need to.
Do you recommend YC to all your friends who are starting tech companies? Or do you think there are certain types of companies or situations where you think it's better to maybe just raise an angel round or a VC round and go from there? Yeah,
I mean, in general, I think I would recommend it to everybody. I'm sure there's like circumstances where it doesn't make sense, but yeah, for the most part, definitely.
Cool. Awesome.